Welcome back, friends! In part one of this two-part series, Andy sits down with Mike Larson. His story begins as an ambitious engineering student who soon found himself playing an integral part of the development of the Beaver Creek Ski Resort in the 70s and 80s. Stay tuned and don't forget to keep an eye out for part two, which is all about Vail Mountain.
Okay, we are here with Mike Larson, and he is a friend, but also has a lot of history with Vail. And so I would love to share with everyone some background, story, history about you, Beaver Creek, Vail, because we have so much information with you and you have so much to share. We thought best that we'd split this up into 2 episodes. You get 2 episodes, one Beaver Creek, part 1, and then part 2 will be Vail. So for everyone out there, because there's so much good information for you to share, we are breaking this up. So let's start with Beaver Creek, and actually a little bit more, let's go backwards. Let's go back to share with everyone a little bit about yourself, and maybe even if going back to before Vail and where you went to college, because that fits into Vail and Beaver Creek.
It was a lot of fortunate events that occurred, yeah. I grew up in Denver and had started skiing when I was about 10 years old with my family, and ended up going to school at Boulder at CU, and I started off in engineering and ended up getting a 5-year degree, a combined degree in business and aerospace engineering. So I kind of thought that I would be going to Seattle at some point in time, but they were saying things like, well, the last person to leave, please turn out the lights. So I started looking around, and as a senior project, a friend of mine in aerospace engineering and I decided to build hang gliders. At that time were being used in water ski shows, and both of us were water skiing in Boulder, and we decided to build 3 kites and sell them. And I ended up finding out that someone else in Denver was buying parts for hang gliders, and found out who it was, and it was 2 ski instructors from Vail, Colorado, who had started a new business down there. And they said, well, this is amazing. Do you have experience flying? And I had never self-launched or anything, and only behind boats. And so they said, well, you go down, you can have one of our kites and take it up and show us what you can do. So on Green Mountain, we went up and, much to my surprise, took off and flew down successfully.
That's a good start.
They were impressed. They said the only person they dealt with was out in California doing that. So, okay, it worked. And at that point in time, they said, well, why don't you come join us and become a part of the business. So I did for a little while, ended up working in the flight school to teach other people how to fly, because I was learning myself.
No one else was flying.
Yeah. And I found out that Vail ski patrolmen, including Paul Testweed and Homer, I can't remember Homer's last name, but Homer was flying. I think he had some ski background in flying. And so there was an interest on the part of ski school and in ski patrol to learn to fly. So they were coming down. And the next winter, Paul Testweed, I think it was 1973.
That's what I was going to say. Let's give everyone a little bit of reference when that started with the hang gliding back when you went to school, as much as you want to share with everyone.
Well, there was a number of ski school people that were learning to fly, and Dave Gorsuch, too.
Yeah.
Trying to learn to fly. And they would come down to Denver, and then Paul Testweed asked if I would, because he knew I was had been skiing. And I don't think I was a good enough skier, quite honestly, to join patrol at that time, but I learned quickly. So I thought I was a good skier, but ski patrol is a different challenge.
Yes.
So it was a learning experience for me. I came up in the winters and spent 2 or 3 winters working ski patrol in Vail, and got to know people in the operation and stuff. Now, while I was going to school in Boulder, I also spent my summers doing survey and construction work for the Highway Department, Colorado Division of Highways. And so I got a background in survey and used some of my engineering more effectively. And so I had a background in road design and survey. And in 1976, Pete Seibert came in to patrol and asked if there was anybody there that would be interested in coming down to Beaver Creek, because they had acquired the land and nothing had been built. It was Willis Nottingham's property then. It had been purchased. The old Mirabelle's farmhouse was empty and full of farm animals living on the back porch. No one had been in the house for a while. So
Which, by the way, is now a fine dining
oh
restaurant.
yeah, fine French dining restaurant.
And just to give the context, not to interrupt you, but the Nottingham Ranch, wasn't that about 2,600 acres or so?
You know, I can't remember the exact number. It was around 2,600.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact number. I've seen in doing a little background research, I've seen numbers between 22 and 26. So
Okay,
I have
just
to
so
verify
people
that.
understand
But it was
how big of a-
basically the lower half of the valley, including the village side at Beaver Creek, parts of Chair 12, the western hillside, and the entry area coming up from the valley. So, yeah, and then there was the Forest Service had done a permit approval starting back in 1972, and then in 74 they had finally signed off, much to the chagrin of some of the Colorado people, for a new ski area to be approved. And the premise was, and I think Pete Seibert was involved in this, was that it would become the site for the 1976 Olympics, for the Denver-based 1976 Olympics, and Beaver Creek would be the ski product for that area. So, but in 74 or 5, the state under Governor Lamb, they decided not to do it because they were trying to limit development in the mountains, and we're concerned about that. And there was a lot of skepticism about whether additional ski area capacity would ever be needed.
Little did they know.
Yeah, well, it was Vail Resorts. It was a very different place at that point in time, and Vail was, you know, one of the larger ski areas in the world even then, and there was question whether extra capacity would even be filled ever. But as we know, that changed a lot over the years.
And to give some people reference, because there's some people that obviously are familiar with some of the history, but then some of the newer people or younger people don't realize maybe that it wasn't really Vail Resorts back then. It was a different company.
Well, it was Vail Associates under Harry Bass at the time when Harry and Dick Bass were brothers, one in Snowbird and one out here.
Yeah. Share about what that looked like as far as the vision and helping with that, with the snowcat tours or Jeep tours.
Well, as a patrolman, I was just driving a snowcat, and we would just take people, including the Forest Service and interested, involved people, up onto the mountain and try to give them a feeling of the size and scope. But there was nothing cleared or developed or anything else. We actually skied the run Latigo is a series of parks through the aspen trees that we could do that and come down from the midpoint on the mountain. We had finally gotten a road up to the midway that could be used by the snowcat in the wintertime. But the first year, Pete would bring people up to the village site and juggle and cook steaks and have a good time and hope they were interested in maybe investing. So right. That was his forte, and he did it better than anybody else.
Yeah, it is amazing. And then we're going to fast forward a little bit to how you got involved maybe in the design work of the mountain aspect.
because I'd been down there for a couple of winters running the snowcat, I kind of had gotten to know the mountain, and we had a master plan that had been developed over a number of years with people involved, Dean Kirkling and J.C. Clark and other people involved in the Vail planning area, and with Bob Parker and the other management people that were running Vail Associates at the time. And they had a strong vision for a European-style village, had visited Europe a number of times in order to try to create the qualities. And Jack Zarin, who was the staff architect hired on, Jack has continued to do work in the valley with a large-scale company. And they had a very good vision for what they wanted. Now, my background with the survey and engineering work, our first project was to build that road going up. So I began to lay out and design a road, a mountain road and skiway that would work up to the midway. And then that evolved into learning about the runs, the future, and modifying the existing plan to try to update it and make sure it was consistent with what we found on the mountain. So I was hired in 1976 to go full-time up at Beaver Creek doing layout design with Dean Kirkling. And we ended up having more people involved over the years, but that was the start.
Yeah, so much for your summer job down in Denver. And this being a part-time job, which is so fascinating how it all intertwines with your background in school, the hang gliding, the road. I mean, this was, little did you know, the path. So I'm sure everyone is thankful, and little did they know what you were going to bring to the table, as well as just naturally, organically.
Well, it was always an evolving process with a lot of people involved. We had the development company doing their work on the village. The village hall was a very deep hole in the ground, building the parking structure and trying to start the initial infrastructure for the village.
Yeah.
And we opened in December 15th, 1980, with a tennis bubble.
Yeah.
As the only facility.
At the base there.
At the base,
that
yeah.
was, what would that tennis bubble be where the village hall is now? Or
No, it was sitting right next to chair 6, kind of where the club is, where the owners club is right now. Yeah.
Okay,
that
right
was
in
the
there.
site,
Okay,
yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then everything was formulated out of that tent.
No, it was
Even when the lifts came, right?
well, the lifts were when we opened. We had 6 lifts, all fixed grip, slower chairs,
Right.
because that was the only thing that was available. That was the state of the art at that time. And we thought, oh well, we're ahead of the curve. We got all these brand new lifts, and lo and behold, 4 years later, we found out detachables were available, and
Right.
we knew we'd have to replace all of the fixed grip chairs.
Right, which will be part of what you discuss in part 2, Vail, of how that came about, because the story behind that is fascinating on that alone. But yeah, so now we've got the tennis bubble, we've got the opening. Wasn't there a little story about the opening of Beaver Creek?
Oh, yeah. The technical opening was on December 15th, and we were open for, I think it was actually, some of the history says one day. I think that it was 2 or 3, but probably people weren't coming, so we didn't know. It hadn't snowed, and snowmaking was not a part of ski area design, a fundamental part of ski area design at that point. So we had a little snowmaking in the Haymeadow, but nothing up on the mountain. And it was a very sparse snow season up until the mid-December area, and unusually dry. And so instead of trying to operate under poor conditions, the decision was made to close down, and in the next week we got significant amounts of snow and were able to open back up. So it was probably one of, and we had a group of people that had been working for 4 to 5 years on the area, committed to it, and then to not have a good opening was very disappointing, to say the least.
Right.
But cemented an organization that was guest oriented and dedicated to the area, and very much committed to the success of Beaver Creek.
So, with that being said, I can't recall, did the Indian chief and the snow dance come to Beaver Creek, or was that only in Vail?
No, he came. We asked the Ute
Because there is a
Indians-
reason why we say
Yeah.
do the snow dance.
Well, this was the situation at Beaver Creek was very similar to the one that happened back in 1962 when they opened Vail. They opened on the 15th of December, or tried to also, and had limited snow. But I think they called him in early because they knew there was a problem. And
And he was a member of the Ute tribe.
the Southern Ute tribe, yeah, and based in Montrose is their tribal headquarters.
Okay.
Yeah. So they were kind enough to come and understood the situation and had been the long-term residents of the valley. We actually had a very nice summertime encampment, a number of encampments in Beaver Creek that were all archaeologically, explored and excavated and preserved before the area started. It was a big
Right.
concern.
Yeah.
The best camp I remember was a sheep pen above Willis Nottingham's house. That you could actually see the evidence of the fire that they had up against a rock. There was a little stream running down. There was Aspen Grove right there. It was a beautiful spot where his sheep pen was, though we could find arrowheads every once in a while when the rain would come down, and you could just walk through the sheep pen and see the arrowheads come to surface. And I think they had excavated a number of weapons and things like that. But it was a perfect spot for the Indians because they could overview the valley down toward Avon, see anybody coming from either direction and not be seen themselves.
Yeah.
And it was a idyllic Indian camp,
Well-
hunting camp for the summer.
And you have the Ute Trail, which is actually one of my favorite trails to hike over in Arrowhead.
Yeah.
So that is the Ute Trail in Arrowhead, which now when we talk about Arrowhead, that's a whole nother shift to the next segment of how Beaver Creek expanded into that area. So, and I know you have some interesting stories even. I remember when I've been here over 40 years, since 1984, and back then, I don't even know what year Arrowhead, the private ski mountain, was. Do you know when that got established? I can't recall when that was established.
Well, they built the golf course. I believe they opened up 9 holes in 1988. And the idea was to become a fully private ski area and golf course. Mm-hmm. And they opened with 9 holes.
Jack
No,
Nicklaus.
you know what? It was before that because
It was before that, because I was here in 1984, and I remember that when they were trying to develop initially with Arrowhead.
I think the golf course opened in 84 or 86, 9 holes. And they actually began work on the mountain in 88, trying to open that up. And their plan was to do fixed grip chairs. They had a plan, Pete had a plan that had been in place for a while to do fixed grip chairs. But by that time, the high-speed quads
were
in place and were available. And we'd actually done one in Beaver Creek and knew how good they were, and we're working in Vail to retrofit. We'd done 4 up there.
Yeah.
And
we'll talk more about that when we talk about Vail.
But we knew the technology was available.
there, right.
So I started working with the planners at Arrowhead, and we knew that long-term, regardless of business plans, that skiing could connect, that it was a natural connection in between the two. So we worked on designs to allow that to happen.
In case it did.
In case it did. And so they installed, their first chair was a high-speed quad bottom to top in 1988. That's when they opened their, but they could operate the whole area with just 1 chair, which was less expensive for them and was quite successful for skiing.
Right. And for the locals, it was completely different, separate from
There was no
the Vail.
connection at that
No
time.
connection at the time, but it was a favorite for a lot of locals to just go ski Arrowhead, or even, do you remember Blinky's Burgers, to go have a burger down at the base of Arrowhead, which Blinky still worked there for the longest
They
time.
didn't, it was a temporary facility too, like the tennis bubble, so, yeah.
But it still is recognized as Blinky's Burgers. Now it's a more permanent
Yeah.
fixture with Broken Arrow. But
It was a Broken Arrow Cafe,
Yeah.
I believe, even, they called it that even if it wasn't a permanent
yeah,
facility.
right. All with Blinky's Burgers, and everyone would bring their chairs. I'm a little embarrassed to say back then, I didn't really ski much. I did go to the base of Arrowhead and try to snowplow down the mountain
it was
occasionally, and
great.
had a Blinky burger and a beer, and people would have their lounge chairs and just kind of hang out, especially in the spring.
It was very nice,
Oh, my gosh.
sunny spot,
Oh.
out of the wind and very nice.
Yeah, it was special. So do you have something you would like to share? Because I think it would be important with anything regarding the acquisition of Arrowhead and how that came about.
Well, I always thought that it would happen. I always thought it was so natural. And when Vail Resorts began to explore the possibilities, they spent a number of years understanding how that connection would work. And, I think there was a limited amount of demand for a private ski area. It's almost what we've learned a little bit in looking at the sociology of this is people like to be seen skiing. That's one thing they want to have happen. And when it's quiet and everything's all to yourself, it feels a little unnatural. So
Interesting.
that was a problem at Beaver Creek in the early days too. Same sort of situation. And the more people you can get in to a certain level and enjoy the product together, the better. So Vail Resorts recognized that. And what happened was the upper portion of the mountain where the skiing occurs in Bachelor Gulch, down to the combined lifts, there's a little cabin down there that was the property line of the real bachelors in Bachelor Gulch. Well, the Anderson cabin
Right? Yeah.
was on Arrowhead property, just below the line, and everything above that was Beaver Creek property. But there was there was a limited amount of real estate that we could do on the upper portion, and there was a limited amount of skiing that they could do on the lower portion. So it made sense to kind of combine the two products and see what could be done together. And Vail Resorts, I think, purchased the property in '93, maybe '94. At any rate, that proved to be very successful. And then we began construction of skiing and lifts and real estate in Bachelor Gulch, which ended up being a very desirable product, both skiing and resort real estate.
Yeah, which is a whole nother dynamics. I mean, literally, when the village to village, whether Arrowhead, Bachelor Gulch, Beaver Creek, they all have their own feel, which is quite interesting, with it all being intertwined. Now, of course, we talk about being seen, the Ritz-Carlton après scene. I don't know if you go up there much.
Oh, yes, I do.
Which is, talk about being seen. Okay, if you haven't experienced that, that's a whole nother.
I would say, though, as nice as the Ritz is, Rick Sackbauer, who also runs the private club restaurant, or did up there, had another little temporary tented facility right where the Ritz was. And I'm sorry, but that was a very nice facility in its time, too. It wasn't quite the Ritz then.
No, it wasn't quite the Ritz then. And it's even evolved over the last even 5-10 years. It's changed quite a bit. But okay, well, that is a good overview of Beaver Creek and how that all evolved. Do you have any other stories or anything else, any points that come to mind before we go on to part 2 of Vail? Because that is interesting in itself with how the transition, what we talked about with the lifts and expansion in that area and how that changed.
Well, I would say that the employees, everyone that worked at Beaver Creek, the development company and on the mountain, and for all the operation departments, were committed to the quality and success of the area, and I think that's always come through. And very proud of the situation that's evolved down in Beaver Creek, and really happy that I could be a part of it.
Yeah.
A small part, but
Yeah.
Everybody played
A
a
bigger
significant
part than
role.
I think you're giving yourself credit, but it's a village. It
It
takes
is
a village.
It is always a village that makes things happen.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people who made it happen and made it happen for a lot of other people. So
All right. Well, thank
great
you.
experience.
And
Thank you for the opportunity just to talk about it a little bit.
well, I think it's important to share with people the history, and the whole reason why I'm having you and other people on is to share, because, the history, the past, the present, the future, I think it's important for everyone to see. There's new generations, there are the older generations that have seen the changes, to have those memories. There's a lot of stories that can't be told. Or they don't want to be shared, maybe we should say, but they're still burned, ingrained in everyone's mind. But it's nice to share those before they really get lost in time.
It's always been a privilege to be a part of the Vail Valley.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. All right, well, thank you, Mike.
Great.
And on to part 2 here and shortly, and we'll go on from there. Thank you.
Thanks.